Hey guys, so in this video we are going to talk a little bit about reality and real projects. So let's get into it. Now this is going out to the juniors out there, and I suppose that I need to give you a little bit of a perspective on something that I did when I was still in school, and I'm very happy that I did so because I think it taught me more than I could have possibly learned in the same amount of time by simply studying and simply doing, all the things that you normally would do if you are trying to go into software. Now let me explain. So the thing is that when I was still in the university, I was recruited by two brothers basically, and we started working together on this project, like this startup idea basically. And the idea here was to, just build something, or rather I joined this project just basically to get in the practice, and it seemed to be the sort of project that I would enjoy building because I would be the developer, and I had never worked on a real project before. And at the time when I first started, I had this. Well, this is what comes with experience. It's what I realized over the years that I've been working on this, is that in the beginning I had all of these idealistic ideas that you have usually when you start out, where you have the idea that you're going to use microservices and you're going to write perfect coverage and everything's just going to be perfect. You create this picture in your head of how you're going to work and how you're going to structure things. And at least me, and I suppose that I'm not alone in this, but I had this, well, let's just call it, like I had this mental picture of how all software should be written, and I couldn't really understand why people wrote software in a different way. Like, why didn't people always use test-driven development? Why didn't people write microservices, for example, and so forth and so forth? And all that inexperience was, that's where I started, right? And then I started working on this, my first real project, and it's not something that was simple. It was not a school project. It was something that was real, something that would take a lot of time to build. And all I can say is that I fucked up so many times, and the project it changed scope, it changed direction. There were all these different issues that I found just piling up, that I honestly struggled with maintaining like these idealistic practices in the way that I wanted, until I felt that, wow, this isn't nice. I came to this realization, I came to this point where I felt that this project is just as shitty as all the other projects that I've worked on, where I've had, where I had the professional grade projects. I had the same sensation, and that's when it dawned on me. I realized that the problem was my way of thinking about the software. It was my mental picture of how I was supposed to be working. That was the issue, and it took me a while to realize that my mental picture of what is perfect is not realistic. It wasn't realistic at all. Think of it this way. When you build a house, you have a mental picture of how that house is supposed to be built. Now, there are best practices for building houses, and in theory, you could build a perfect house. But when you look around, all these different buildings and everything you see around you, all these different constructs, they look different. They're built in different times, using different practices and with different restrictions. There's no such thing as a perfect house. There's no such thing as a house that has no flaws or compromises, and that's true for everything. It's the same thing with cars or any product. Building something perfectly requires an enormous amount of time and energy and effort and money above all else, and most likely more people than you have access to when you start out. And it took me a while to realize that. And it all came from having this personal project that spanned more than just a few days or a few weeks. Because when things it's like when it's at small scale, when you have a small nothing project, it's so easy, guys. It's so easy to write everything perfect. I mean, how hard is it to get 100% test coverage if you have a small web server with maybe say a high number, maybe 1,000 lines of code, 2,000 lines of code. That's easy. It's easy to maintain a perfect code base in that. But when you start building things over time, and it takes a long time to develop the thing, you realize that you have all these compromises. And I don't know how to explain this better than I think I got a perspective on more than just software development. I started realizing why it is that people make different decisions that may in hindsight not seem to be the ideal thing, but it's the way that it has to be made, because there are circumstances when you're working that, you know, kind of come up. That's where you have delays in construction. It's why you have delays in anything. And so what I would like you to take away from this is that if you have this, if you are like me, or rather how I was, and you have this mental picture of how good software development should work, get out into reality. I feel kind of like, you know, the series same, like, I kind of feel like you know, these old war movies where you at the beginning of like Band of Brothers, for example, where you start out with these idealistic young men who go out into war and they're really hungry and they start fighting, and by the end of the series they're so experienced that all that naivete or whatever you call it has left them, and now they're like, they've seen the world, they've seen the reality, and now the new young men who come in and want to fight are just annoying to them, because they as the experienced people realize that I kind of just feel annoyed by that these people don't know what, you know, they don't know what it's about. That's exactly how I feel. I feel like I've gone from that point where by just working on a big project over a long time, I've lost that, or rather I've grown up, if you will. I've acquired the experience that I realized that at the end of the day, there's no such thing as a perfect project. You can't build it perfectly. What's important is that you try your best to build. You have to build the things that are necessary correctly, and that's to know what's necessary to build correctly and so forth. That's experience, guys. I'm not saying that you shouldn't like try your best to build good software. You should, but I think that you should focus more on getting things to work and to get them working fairly well so that they meet the requirements that you have set out, as opposed to trying to adhere to all these best practices and being super strict with yourself about writing perfect software. Because at the end of the day, no project is perfect. There's always going to be issues and compromises absolutely everywhere. So I hope you take that with you, and I hope you have a great day.